All right. Our next paper is development and acceptability testing of a patient decision aid for urinary diversion with radical cystectomy. And like it sounds, this paper is really the process of a group making a patient decision aid to help counsel and help patients make decisions about which urinary diversion they should get after a radical cystectomy. So the background here is that there is no concrete evidence that's shown a big difference in quality of life or oncologic outcomes between ileoconduit and neobladder urinary reconstruction after cystectomy. And this makes a patient's decision between the two a preference-sensitive decision, which is defined as a choice where a patient encounters a healthcare choice with no superior option, but multiple options with different benefits and harms. And these can be really ripe for decisional conflict. And the process of kind of adequately counseling a patient through this decision process can be hugely time-consuming for providers. To try and combat that, this group set out to develop and evaluate a patient decision aid for individuals undergoing cystectomy to help them decide which urinary diversion might be right for them. Their methods are really the kind of approach on how to make a patient decision aid. And so you start by identifying the decision and the patient population of interest. You form a team of content and methodologic experts. You do a literature review with them, establish the difference between your various options and what the outcomes are of them. And then you create a decision aid prototype, send it out for alpha testing with some of your users, and then incorporate feedback and finalize a decision aid to release. So after you kind of identify your problem, which we've kind of already done, the first step is forming this team of content and methodologic experts. And this group brought together 4 academic urologists, 1 community urologist, an international leader in making these patient decision aids, and then most importantly, a urology resident. They together reviewed the literature to determine options, related benefits and harms. This is not totally clear in the paper, I'll be honest. And so they say that there's a summary of evidence table available for the various outcomes from reconstruction methods, but it's supposed to be supplementary appendix A, and I swear there isn't one anywhere on the Journal of Urology website. It says somewhere they have to contact the authors for this. So that's kind of a bummer. After that lit review that they did, though, they created a prototype decision aid. And their goal for this decision aid was to have it maintain about a 6th grade language level. And it turns out there's a scale for this. The one they utilized is called the Simple Measure of Gobbledygook, or SMOG, Readability Index. And they were, again, aiming for a 6th grade level here. This brought them to alpha testing. And so once they had their prototype, they gave it to 8 academic urologists, 9 survivors, people who had radical cystectomies, and 4 of these had in ileoconduits, 5 of them had neobladders, and then 1 APP that did a lot of counseling for these patients. And because I frankly didn't know what it was, the difference between alpha and beta testing is that alpha testing is pre-release trialing, which is done kind of within the organization, creating the app or device or metric or patient decision aid. And then beta testing is done outside the organization when you actually give it to prospective users to use in their environment. The alpha testing in this case was given to a number of urologists, 8 of them. And this was kind of an example of the feedback that they were looking to get from those urologists. And so basically, after kind of reviewing this patient decision aid, would it be easy for me to use? Is it easy for me to understand? Is it similar to kind of what I would otherwise be discussing with patients? Does it fit my kind of general counseling approach? And do you think it'll help my patients make better decisions? And will it make kind of my job of guiding them through this decision easier? The last step is to kind of incorporate the feedback that they got from these urologists, survivors, and APP, and finalize their decision aid. So their results are really kind of their experience in producing this aid and then the aid itself. And so experience-wise, the results from the alpha testing was that both physicians and patient reviewers felt that the kind of first version didn't adequately address the financial burden of stoma supplies, which is not something that's totally on my radar. So that was an interesting read. Patients in particular wanted to emphasize that there was the potential for an intraoperative decision being made, which would, based on their anatomy or cancer specifics, that may change whether they are eligible or whether they'd be recommended to have a conduit versus a neobladder. And then physicians specifically felt that in the first version, there was not adequate discussion of alternatives to alternative continent cutaneous diversions, pouches, et cetera. And so this is what the patient decision aid actually is. And so this is the first page. And again, it's just kind of laying out what this decision is. And so should I have a stoma or should I have an internal reservoir when you remove my bladder cancer? So they give a little bit of background on bladder cancer. And then they really dive into what your options are for diverting your urine. And so they talk through internal bladder replacement or neobladder, what an ileal conduit looks like and how that works. And then to the point of kind of incorporating the physician feedback, they added an area here about other continent cutaneous diversions. And then incorporating that patient feedback, they added a disclaimer here that, rarely a surgeon may find information during the operation that changes their recommendations for your diversion. After kind of introducing what the two are, they go through the benefits of each option for diversion. And then the risks of them or disadvantages. And so for neobladder, they highlight the daytime and nighttime urinary leakage, as well as urinary retention. For ileal conduit, they highlight peristomal hernias and stomal stenosis. And they're using these kind of graphics here to try and demonstrate the incidence of each of these outcomes. And they're doing it in this graphical manner, claiming that it's a little bit easier for patients to kind of see comparatively. And then they kind of help to guide, after providing all this information, how to make this decision. And so rate on scales of importance, reasons why you would choose to have a neobladder or a stoma. And once you've kind of thought through that, put your money down. So which option would you prefer? And then a quick knowledge check for the purposes of kind of improving the patient decision aid on how well it worked for them and how well they kind of took away the information. The strengths of the work that this group did is that they did create a very structured, they followed a very structured evidence-based development process, and that their final product, I would say, does serve a real area of need. This is a kind of counseling that we are iteratively doing with patients over and over, and these aids can help us to do that much more consistently and give a much clearer picture of the decision they have to make. The criticisms that they highlight for themselves is that in truth, like these outcomes that they're discussing in the patient decision aid, they are all based off of mostly retrospective or chart review data analysis. There aren't any RCTs that exist directly comparing the outcomes between these two options. And to that end, the kind of point estimates of outcomes may change with time as more research increases our accuracy on this. They point out that they did omit confidence intervals in discussing the outcome risks, and that this was done to not confuse patients. I don't know that this is a criticism. I think this is a quite reasonable thing to do personally. And then their last critique is that the patient decision aid doesn't adequately discuss other reconstruction options. It introduces them in that one page that we showed, but it doesn't talk through their kind of benefits and risks and process in nearly as much detail. And ultimately, the next step, kind of to follow up this paper, would be prospective beta testing. And so here, actually rolling it out to users as they're going through this decision process, and then getting feedback on how well or whether or not it helps them through the process. With that, I'll open up for discussion.